Well, that's right.
How you doing, Dr. Steve?
I'm doing well.
They don't like
Got 3 on that. Boy, we barely got.
Yeah. Don't ask.
We got 3 more minutes, so people talk. You'll be chatty if they want.
Better make it.
3 minute stories. 3 minutes.
Tell me yesterday you lost.
Oh, God, but yeah, that's what was that?
Oh, yeah, we're good.
I was liberal arts. Yeah, that's right. I did a lot of that. You got a minute.
It's 9 a.m. and I will call to order our January committee meetings of the Board of Regents. I'll ask Regent West to do a roll call.
Chair Bale,
Present.
Regent Ball, Regent Brinkley,
Present.
Regent Henson, Regent McKinney, Vice Chair Melkin,
Here.
Regent Nichols, Regent Spiller,
Present.
Regent Thomas.
Here.
Secretary West here and
Present.
Chair, we have total of 8 regents present representing a quorum of the board.
And I think that is a quorum of each committee that we'll have in session today. We're glad to see our president with us via Zoom. As he has publicly acknowledged, he did recently test positive, but clearly is doing well, and we're thankful for that and for the message that he has sent out to the greater community to be vaccinated. So glad to have you with us via Zoom today, Mr. President.
It is very good to be with you all electronically and Zoomically. I'm feeling better.
But I will reiterate what I said in my message. If you've not yet been vaccinated or boosted, please go do that. That's the way through this. I'm so thankful that I was, and I'm certain that that has aided me in having both mild symptoms and a quick recovery. So looking forward to being back in person very soon.
Good. Good. All right, our first committee is the Academic Affairs Committee, and that is Chair West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 3 action items to discuss and vote on today in the committee, and I will turn it over to Provost Fisher to describe those to us.
Thank you. The first one is to approve a cyber data and analytics Master's of Science degree that will be in the Department of Information Systems in the College of Gordon Ford College of Business. This will be an online degree that's geared towards working individuals and people who need flexible degrees. It also has 3 concentrations: a healthcare administration and organizational communication, and a local government administration. And it fits perfectly with what is currently being offered in information science, which is a BS in business and data analytics, and 2 certifications in data analytics and cybersecurity data analytics. And it would become, it would go effective in fall of 2022.
So do we have a motion for approval of the cybersecurity data analytics Master of Science? Second. Okay, any discussion?
So just a quick thing I'd say, having worked with these faculty and Dr. Lincoln over there, I'm a firm believer in this particular program. I think we've all expressed our concerns about even cybersecurity from our own point of view and risk management, what we deal with at WKU. The provost and I attended a Student Success Summit last week, and one of the sessions we attended was from the admissions people, and they were talking about how admissions partners is willing to partner with the department on come up with a marketing plan of how to get these programs out there so that people will come. I think, recognizing under the rent model, we're moving past this, as we've said before, this, if we build it, they will come. We have to be more proactive how we get this out there. So when I look at an online certificate like this, that I wonder what plan do we have to let people know about the existence of this?
So I can ask them, but I will tell you that since it starts in fall 2022, there will be a blitz. I mean, I see it as both what would be media driven as well as telling the new people coming in that are visiting that this is a new degree that will start in the fall. If they're interested in that area, we will get them more information. So it will be both paper as well as social media to try to get it out to the people out there. Especially as you head sort of down towards Nashville, where that's a huge question right now. If you don't know, there are certificates down there. There's not a lot of degrees down there in this area, and people are looking to move forward down there. And then there's a perfect group of adult learners that we could get on our side and get a hearing.
Maybe that's just one thing for me as we move forward. I'm not sure about the rest of the committee, but we have all of, I definitely see the need, and the department's done a great job of putting together the need for this, but then perhaps as we start to integrate and talk about marketing, what's the next step? And I don't know if we need to see that here or just make that part of the approval process. Do we have a plan to get these out there? And that's just a general comment. And I wanted to talk about that on this particular program because I believe this is a very strong program. So in no way.
Spiller? If I may, I think that this what might be helpful is if we bring the marketing team to talk about the umbrella effort, to talk about how we do this for each of our programs, and then how they nestle under that overall work. We can do that as an information item at the March board meeting.
Sounds great.
I think that would be helpful. Any further discussion or questions or?
If I may, I'm Dr. Kodali, the Associate Provost for Research and Graduate Education. I had presented a comprehensive graduate enrollment management plan to Provost Fisher yesterday. So that was an initial draft. So we are wanting to come up with a systemic strategy to market our programs, and I have a vision and plan. And so the Provost and I will have further discussions. With regards to President Caboni's comment about marketing, the graduate school has partnered with the communications and marketing, and we signed a contract with a digital marketing firm called Carnegie Dartlet. So we were supposed to have a meeting in December, but because of the impacts of the tornado, we have pushed that meeting to January. So as of yesterday, we were in communication with Carnegie Dartlet. And so we do have plans to effectively market our graduate programs, including certificates. So we highlight the value that these programs bring to the community and to the students as well. So please stay tuned. We'll present some ideas to the board at a future meeting if requested. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion, questions, concerns? And I think we're ready to move to a vote on the approval of the Cybersecurity Data Analytics Master of Science. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Passes. Provost Fisher, we have another action item on approval of sabbatical recommendation.
Yes, we're looking for approval of sabbatical for 12 faculty members for the academic year 22-23. They will be gone either a full year or half a year, depending on what they requested. In addition to that, what you should know is that this is working its way from the department level and through there all the way up through the president. So it gets looked at a lot, and people make sure that it is what we're looking for, and the people have a great plan for the future. In addition, to be eligible, you have to have been here 6 continuous years. You need to be ranked with assistant professor or above, and you should have put an application in that tells us how this helps your professional development, your job on this campus. And with that, you can see there's 12, and they're all in, and it's across all colleges.
All right, thank you. Do we have a motion for approval of the sabbatical recommendations?
So
Second. Okay, any discussion or questions? Hearing none.
Regent West, if I could make a comment.
Oh, yes.
So for those of you who are unfamiliar with why someone would take 6 months away from their job and what that might do for them, this is really an important part of what we do as a university. And rewarding faculty who have been with us and are performing at a high level is important. But even more importantly is helping them think about how they can do a deep dive on a project that they couldn't do otherwise because they won't have the same kind of rigorous day-to-day schedule on campus. And so this is really an important way for particularly an associate professor to launch the next phase of their career. It's one of the unique things in higher education that we do this, and I'm proud that we're able to restart this post-pandemic.
quick question. I was lucky enough to have done the work to have sabbatical approved pre-pandemic. And those were delayed because of the pandemic. And then I stepped onto this board. And so I guess delayed again. Did we follow up with those people that were approved for the sabbaticals? Did those go through? I thought it was more than just me. Do you have any ideas what happened with those?
I mean, this process was started as I walked in the door for this year, so I will have to go back. But I would find it difficult to believe that we didn't take care of it for Cheryl.
Is this one?
But I will track it down.
appreciate, this is one of the very important things we have for, as Dr. Boney said, for development of tenured faculty who are committed to the university and shown a lot of great work. So I agree. Appreciate that.
Okay, any other comments or discussion? And then we will move to vote for approval of staff recommendations. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion passes. And we will move on to our third action item, which is the approval of University Distinguished Professor.
So it's a great honor for me to ask for your approval for Dr. John Cipolla from the School of Music as the University Distinguished Professor. He's in the School of Music, as I said, and he's a woodwind specialist and a clarinet, plays the clarinet. A couple of things. If you would have had a chance to see his packet, he's an amazing person. What he's done here and he does outside with community as well as with, I would say, internationally and nationally, is great. But I want to start with his teaching, which puts students at the center. That was what was told to us multiple times. In addition, his student evaluations are excellent. And what you also see is they appreciate his energy and his commitment, and he keeps the students engaged and motivated. And that's what you ask for from a teacher, a really good teacher. In addition, he spends a significant amount of time with the students trying to help them figure out what careers we should be in. And what we see when we look at people who have spent and worked with him is that the large number of them go to public school music teachers, which is really important as we look at there's no teachers out there for literally anywhere. That's happened. A huge number have gone to performing careers, and they've also gone to graduate schools with assistantships. So he's doing a great job at not only educating the students, but helping them figure out the path that's best for them. In addition, his creative activity is amazing. When you look at it, he's worked with a ton of different organizations. He's worked 30 years for New York City with the Radio City Music Hall. He's also been an orchestral woodwind specialist on Broadway and Cats, and he's done a ton of recordings with all kinds of professionals in the music business at a variety of different music venues as well as recording studios. And lastly, what we see, and I think is most important, he gives tons of invited talks around the world and plays around the world, which I think is really important, which shows his international reach, as well as the fact that he does research related to exploration of contemporary music, and he shares that knowledge across the country. So I think he's the perfect person to be the University Distinguished Professor, and I'd like to move that forward.
Thank you, sounds well deserved. And I'm asking for a motion for approval of Dr. John Cipolla, Professor of Music, for the University Distinguished Professor appointment effective July 1st. Any discussion, comment?
If it's not too presumptuous, I would like to suggest that maybe we get to hear this guy sometime.
Sure.
Really?
That would be amazing.
Really?
Would be great.
Before July 1st of 2022, when he takes on that title. Love to hear.
I agree. I think that would be wonderful if we could arrange.
I think he would be more than happy to do that. When I informed him, he was in shock pretty much when I informed him that he had won. And it was really a pleasure to talk to him. So I think he'd be great.
Anybody else? We'll move to a vote for approval of University Distinguished Professor for Dr. John Cipolla. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion passes. And that is all the business of the Academic Affairs Committee.
Thank you, Regent West and Provost Fisher.
Thank you.
Our next committee meeting is Finance and Budget, and we have Chair McKinney with us to lead that discussion.
All right.
We have 4 items on our agenda today.
First one is acceptance of auditors. Year ended June 30th, 2021. Presentation from Crow.
But Jeff, can we forward or do you have to?
Right there.
Okay. So as Chair McKinney talked about, Brad Shelley from Crow is here to talk about the public radio and television audit, as well as the NCAA agreed upon procedures. Just a couple of things, and then I'll turn it over to Brad. So the radio and television, that was a clean audit, unqualified opinion. That's the best audit you can have. So congratulations to them. And the NCAA agreed upon procedures. There were no exceptions noted. Again, that's the best that you can do. So Brad, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you. Stand just so I can speak and you can hear me a little bit better, but thank you all again for allowing me to present. I was here last month and talked through the financial statements of the university, and so happy to be here to talk through the TV, radio, and NCAA procedures we did. So as I just mentioned, those are the 3 that we're going to cover today. I'll plan to go ahead and talk through all 3. I think they're separate, maybe motions or items on your agenda. So if you want me to split those up, I can. But the other letters and reports that are listed here at the bottom, I'll list here again, just so that you'll have a good picture of everything that we've covered and all the reports we presented to here. All of those others were presented in the prior. As it relates to the TV and radio financial statements, again, these are as of June 30, 2021. Those were issued in earlier this month. We also, along with the audit, we do a certification that is required by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So that's something that we do both for TV and radio, and an electronic certification that was completed at the same time. And as Susan mentioned, we had unqualified or unmodified opinions on both financial statements, so a clean opinion. This may be a little bit hard to see because it's a little bit smaller font and a lot of numbers on here, but really this is just meant to be a snapshot, quick overview comparison of the 2 years. So the first column and the upper half of this screen is for the TV. And so you can see just year over year that assets increased, liabilities also increased. Net position was a slight decrease, or a slight increase there from a negative 2.1 to a negative 1.7 million. And again, just as a reminder, the majority of that is related to net pension, net OPEB liabilities that were reported, required to be reported by GASB a few years ago. So that's really the cause of that negative position. As you look at the revenues and expenses, you see fairly consistent, a slight dip in both of those, but overall you still end up with a change in net position, positive $369,000. On the radio side, which is the bottom half of your screen there, again, you'll see in this instance an increase in assets and deferred outflows, also an increase in liabilities and deferred inflows, and a overall net position that is a positive about $500,000. The one thing that's a little bit different here, when you look at the income statement side of things for radio, there was a little bit more of an impact from the net pension and OPEB liabilities. As a reminder, the way those get recorded for TV and radio is that they are allocated based off of FTEs. And so sometimes that has a more significant impact depending on how the FTEs for the overall university are than the liabilities and related deferred inflows and outflows are impacted a little bit more on TV, radio. So you see a little bit more of an impact there, and that's why you see a change. The last couple of things here related to the TV and radio. Again, these audits are done under generally accepted auditing standards and also under government auditing standards, as it falls underneath the university umbrella as a department of the umbrella or Department of University. No real significant accounting policy changes or accounting estimate changes. Those are all consistent with previous years, so nothing to be concerned about there. And the bottom line here is an important one as well. No material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal control. So that's a key thing to note. We also had no posted adjustments, no waived adjustments. So we did not identify any adjustments that needed to be made. Again, another positive. And then as far as the other communications, no significant difficulties, no disagreements, no issues at all during the audit process. We were able to work with management and get all the information and requests that we needed, complete the audit on time, and be able to do the certification. So thank you all to that team. Do you want to stop and? No. Okay. So as far as the last report I want to touch on was the Ncaa report. Again, just as a quick overview here, this is a required report that we do agreed upon procedures. These procedures that are listed here, and there's 53 revenue, testing procedures, 65 expense, 3 additional minimum procedures, and then they added on another 12 minimum procedures for other reporting. I think it got cut off other reporting information. Those are all required by the Ncaa, by the article that's listed there. All Division I universities, colleges have the same procedures that have to be done on an annual basis. And so before we jump into the results of those, the first schedule, if you were looking at the report in the packet, is the schedule of revenue and expenses. And this breaks down the revenues and expenses by major sports, other sports, and then by the major categories of revenue and expenses. And again, the categories that are prescribed there are Ncaa prescribed categories. So there's 19 categories of expenses, 19 categories of revenue and 22 categories of expenses listed. The current year revenue and expense is about $28.9 million compared to about $31.5 in the previous year. And then comparing direct institutional support was about right at $13 million versus about $14 million this year. So there's a lot of categories within there. I pulled those two out as the key ones for a couple of reasons. One, just the overall revenue and expense. So the way it works on this schedule is it has to balance to zero. So your revenues and expenses do balance. The difference there is your institutional support. So as you're looking at that, how much support is being provided by the university for the athletics. So when you see that number decrease from 14 million to 13 million, that's the positive in the sports athletics was generating more revenue and or spending less dollars and needed less support. Obviously, as you look at the revenue and expense as a total, you'll see that decreased a little bit. COVID was the primary impact with that. Of course, in FY20, you had a much less impact there. FY21, there was a much more significant impact as related to both COVID expenses and then less revenues related to that. As far as the actual procedures, just a few things to point out in here. Procedure 4, there were 3 balances that were greater than 10% of total revenues and had a variance greater than 10% from the prior years. I point that out just because there is an explanation listed in there. That's the required procedure, is to look at categories like that. There were 3 balances in there. All the explanations appear to be reasonable, so no concerns there. Procedure 12, and revenue was the only other one that had kind of documentation in there. And there was an immaterial variance in the indirect institutional support. This is pretty common. We have a variance every year, and with working with some other colleges and universities, again, that's pretty common. I pointed out because it was a $7,200 variance, but that's out of $4.6 million of indirect institutional support. So very immaterial variance. All the other procedures under revenue had no exceptions or were not applicable. And similarly, on the expense side, all of those had no exceptions or were not applicable. Lastly, looking at the additional minimum procedures, I point out this one procedure, 1B, just because, again, there's a lot of documentation in that report on that procedure. And so this one, there were 11 sports that had variances year over year of plus or minus 4%. As we looked at that, obviously that makes sense. You're going to have a lot of variance when you're looking at COVID and the impacts that that had. So there were a number of reasons in there that we listed out there, variety of things, either increase or decrease in scholarship team members. In some instances, it was related to cost of tuition, potentially for some of the students, depending on where they are coming from, whether they're in state, out of state, et cetera. But then, as I mentioned, one of the overriding factors was related to COVID-19 and the impacts that that had, especially related to the additional year that the NCAA granted to athletes for most sports. None of the other procedures had any exceptions or. That was a quick overview, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. And again, thank you for both the athletic department and the TV radio stations and working with us to be able to complete those procedures.
Brad. Okay, Brad went over both FB1 and FB2 in that presentation, so we'll tackle FB1 first. Do I have a motion to approve or to accept the auditor's report and financial statements for WKYU TV and WKYU FM radio for year ended June 30th, 2021? So, all right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, does anybody have any questions or comments on the auditor reports? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, like sign. If we abstain, please no. Thanks. Motion carries. And then FB2, do I have a motion to accept the accountant's report on application of agreed upon procedures, NCAA compliance report for the year ended June 30th, 2021? So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on this item? All right, hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. All right, that motion carries as well. Thank you guys very much. All right.
Todd Stewart's sitting in with us, and take a second to compliment him on a clean report. I would assume you had something to do with that.
All right. The next item on our list is Fb3 Acceptance for filing of the statement of revenues and expenditures for the 6 months ended December 31st, 2021. Susan, would you like to?
Sure. Jeff, can you bring that back up? So just some introductory comments. So this is our second quarter budget. This is actual report. Just overall, the university continues to do a good job of stabilizing finances. And so overall revenue is 71% of the total budget for this fiscal year. This time last year was 70% of the total budget. That's trending well. If you look, drill down a bit more into revenue, net tuition revenue, that's simply our gross tuition revenue less institutional scholarships. That's trending as I reported in the first quarter. It is trending below budget. And what we did anticipating this, we held back some year-end funds as a contingency to cover that shortfall. So we were anticipating somewhere between 8 and 10 million for the total year. And so we held back about 8 million at year end to cover the shortfall. So the good news on the tuition revenue is that early indications are that the fall to spring retention looks good. So our spring tuition revenue is trending above what we anticipated. So that's good news on the tuition revenue side. Grants and contracts on the revenue side, just remember, you'll see a light change on the expenditure side, is trending significantly higher than the prior year. And most of that is directly related to the federal and state CARES funding that we received. Other revenue, sales and service are trending higher than the prior year, primarily because of the resumption of campus programs and activities.
Before you move on the net tuition revenue, would you mind just addressing, there was a pretty big jump in new scholarship programs. Can you just address how we think that's affected us, and would the gross tuition been lower if we hadn't implemented those?
Sure. So you're correct. It is trending upward because of the new scholarship program. But what we found, and what would have been the case, is that the decline in enrollment would have been greater had we not instituted the financial aid program, and that would have more than offset the increase in financial aid. So it's done exactly what we hoped it would have done. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Regent McKinney, if I could also jump in. I think the other thing to know about the scholarship program is how it's shaping that incoming class. And so you'll recall in the fall semester, we reported that the first year students had the best academic profile of any incoming class in the history of the university, and the highest GPA ever. Because we're shaping that academic profile, you're seeing our retention numbers grow. And I'm not going to make any news on that today, but they are in very good shape from fall to spring. When they're finalized, we'll bring those to you. But because of that, you see revenue in the spring being up again as well. So again, thinking about the totality of the strategy and the reason that we went to an expanded scholarship program, it's doing what we hoped it would do, as Susan said.
So quickly turning to the expenditure side, I continue to say this in the second quarter as I did in the first quarter. The university is, the vice presidents, directors are doing a good job controlling the expenditures. And that's what we hoped. If you remember right, in the prior year budget, we put the control of managing expenditures at the central level. And in this budget, we basically loosened those central controls, or basically got rid of them, and put the control out at the deans and vice presidents and directors levels. And they are doing exactly what we had hoped. They are controlling the expense level of the university. So overall, it's tracking slightly higher than prior year, but this is primarily because of these two categories that you'll see on your report. Equipment is over budget, and that's primarily related to reimbursable COVID-related purchases. And again, those are reimbursable, but it's trending up on the expenditure side. And the federal student financial aid is up due primarily because of the direct reimbursements to our students that we paid off balances and all of that. So the final note under direct expenditures, supplies and expenses are tracking below the prior year. That's what I was talking about, the deans and vice presidents and directors doing what we hope they would do and controlling the expenses of the university.
If I could ask a little about that. So, and we talked about this already. This is that last year we were way under what we budgeted for that, as well as we were, as you said, had centralized control for it. And this year we're way under what we budgeted for it, as the deans have taken on ownership of the expenses in their own area. Are we then over budgeting in that area? Or are we tracking towards what would be true expenditures? Or are they holding back and we're going to see a surge at some particular point? Because this is significantly under budget. So, what's the long term? how do we deal with this moving forward?
Right, and I think goes to our new budget model. So I don't think you're gonna see this surge of spending at the end, because the destiny is in the hands of the deans and vice presidents. So they certainly don't want to make any big spending at the end, because it would make sense to a decentralized budget model. So I don't think you're gonna see that, Shane. I think the deans and vice presidents want to maintain their spending. Now, as far as are we budgeting and spending from the correct categories? Again, I think in an incremental budget model, you kind of, year over year, there's not a lot of changes to those categories. In a responsibility center budget or a decentralized budget model, you're gonna see the deans really budgeting down probably at a better level than what we've done in the past. So does that answer your question?
Yes, I'm just thinking about tracking this over time and what this would mean for next year's budget and what we see at this level versus the granular level in the colleges. And so
We might see some variations, but I think the variations can be explained primarily through the deans explaining that, this budget was previously in S&E or supplies and expense, and we moved it into travel to better reflect what we're going to actually travel. And then finally, on the expenditure side, the personnel expenditures, again, congratulations to the university holding on their personnel expenditures. And they're in line with the prior year. And again, taking off those central controls, the deans and vice presidents are doing what they need to do to control their expenses for their units. So that's all I have on the second quarter budget versus actual.
I'll entertain a motion to accept the following, the statement of revenues and expenditures for the 6 months ended December 31st, 2021 and 2020. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Regent Brinkley, do I have a second? Anybody have any further discussion or questions?
Chair, I want to comment very quickly. I want to just, for the board, note an appreciation for Susan and her team in scheduling, prioritizing, and meeting with the faculty, regent, and myself prior to each one of these meetings. That's been a good way for us to get questions at different levels answered. And I appreciate that time prioritization. I know it's difficult, but that's been a plus in our.
And I would just follow up, and I try to share this with faculty, senate, and others. I've not found any questions that I've asked yet. If there's any ducking of any questions, an honest engagement, and everyone seems to be very on top of things. And I'm pretty attuned to people trying to hide things, and I'm not sensing that at all. So there's a common cause of call on campus for transparency, and this is one of the things that contributes to that. I appreciate that as well.
Thank you.
Regent McKinney, if I could comment on Regent Spiller's comment on transparency and the process we've used. A reminder that as we began the shift or about 4 years ago to a decentralized budget model, we talked about representation. We talked about a process that was clear. And as a reminder, we continue to follow that process. It's everywhere out there in terms of how we go through building the budget. We're going to follow the same process this year that we followed in previous years. And I'm continue to be committed to not just transparency, but devolving control of budgets to deans and vice presidents. And again, this is exciting that we are where we are. And I'm thankful for the leadership of Susan and Bud, but also our deans and vice presidents. They've just done a terrific job with the control that's been devolved to them. And I think you're going to begin to see additional strategic rewards to that as they make decisions for their organizations and how they deploy those resources in a decentralized way versus those decisions being made centrally.
Do I have any other comments or questions?
Well, I'll make a comment as well and echo what others have said, and also shout out appreciation to everybody on this committee, particularly Chair Chair McKinney, who's had his sleeves rolled up for years now, doing a great job with that committee. But it's interesting to note that the sky didn't fall when we put both the staff and faculty regents on that committee. And I appreciate the work that Susan's done with both of them and the work that they've done.
Very good. All right, if there's no other discussion, I'll call the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. The motion carries. The last item on our agenda for today is Fb3 faculty and staff personnel action.
I really don't have any comments about that. It's a pretty standard report. It's all the personnel actions that happened in the second quarter, along with a one-time compensation package.
Very good. Do I have any questions or comments on this item? All right, hearing none, or actually I need a motion. Do I have a motion to approve Fb4 faculty personnel action?
So moved.
Yes, do I have a second? Oh, I gotta have the name in there. Sorry. Thank you, Rick Franklin. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. All right, that motion carries.
So quick, Todd was gonna make a comment earlier and you moved on.
Oh, did I?
He's listening to us.
Todd, did you want to make a comment earlier and I missed you? Okay. Very good. And that does it. Conclude my motion.
Okay. Anyone need a break? If not, we're gonna move right on into the executive committee. And we do have a quorum present. We have one action item, which relates to grant of a utility easement for Chick-Fil-A.
Oh, good to see you again. This is, as you mentioned, it's a approval of a utility easement. In 2019, the WKU Foundation sold the 2 out parcels at the Center for Research and Development to Chick-Fil-A. They are now moving through the process to move forward with construction, going through planning and zoning to get their plat approved. Moving on to the easement itself is where the red arrow is. So it's a little difficult to see that because it's a fairly large drawing that's shrunk down to scale for the slide, but it's about 100 feet long and it's 10 feet wide or so. Taking water draining from the Chick-Fil-A parcel, overflow water to the existing drainage basin. There is expectation it'll be the same volume of water that's going there now, so that no additional water. It's basically just carrying it through a pipe underneath the road as opposed to surface flow. So it's directing that water flow to the basement, to the basins. So that's pretty much it. It would be a permanent easement, for the Chick-Fil-A development, and I think they're expecting completion of the project in 2023.
Anyone have any questions, comments? This would be our second Chick-fil-A.
Third. Yeah. It'll change some traffic in the area, to say the least.
People like Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, fourth if you include the one on campus. That's it. You can see the lines at DSU.
All right, any questions, comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval of a utility grant easement.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion from Regent Penny and a second from Regent West. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, like sign. Grant there, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have a couple of information items. One is a date change for our end of the year budget committee meeting. And I think President Boney can explain that to us.
Thank you, Chair Bale. We have to report out our finalized approved budget to the Council on Post-Secondary Education for them to approve. And our meeting, which historically has been later in June, actually fell after the CPE meeting where they would approve our budget. So we have to actually get that done before their meeting. And so that necessitated that date change in June. And Beth will tell you what that date is, Beth.
June 10th. Hopefully, everyone can make that fit their calendars. That is an important meeting. So we'll have June 10th on the calendar. Okay. Our next information item is a legislative update. I think we have Jennifer Smith here with us to tell us some of the goings on in Frankfurt.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Thank you all for letting me do this morning. Thought it might be helpful if I explain a little bit about my role and what I do when I'm up there before I get into this. But my role is government and external relations. And so I spend 2 to 3 days a week in Frankfurt, following legislation, attending committee hearings, having meetings with legislators, whatever needs to happen to move the agenda for our education forward. So the first week of the legislative session was a little different this year. They spent it with redistricting. And through the redistricting bill, the House Bill 2, Warren County lost 2 representatives in that redistricting, Steve Riley and Jason Petrie. So they will now no longer represent a portion of Warren County. Both of them just had several precincts, so it wasn't, large pieces of the county. And then in the Senate bill, we still have Senator Mike Wilson, but we also gained David Givens and Max Wise. And so the county is now split up into 3 different Senate districts. The governor has vetoed the House bill. The House overrode that veto last night, and then a lawsuit was filed. So we'll see what happens as that moves forward. And the governor has not taken any action on the Senate bill just yet. So as long as everything stays intact, that's what it'll look like for us with those slight changes. Pretty unprecedented year in the fact that the House introduced the budget before the governor gave his budget proposal in his budget address last week. There was a committee substitute on the budget yesterday. And what that did, so the original bill that the House introduced, it did not add any additional funding to our base appropriation from the state. But what it did do is it added $50 million each year of the biennium into performance funding. So that gives us a lot of ability to perform for those dollars. It also included the asset preservation pool. Now the House has put that in the past few budgets, and it has not made it through the entire budget process. But we're hoping that this year there's such a surplus of funds on the state level that we're hoping that money stays in there. But WKU would receive 37 million, I believe it is, of those asset preservation funds. What CPE suggested was a matching pool where the universities would match a portion of that money. The House did not put that in there. So right now the House is just saying, here's your money, do what you need to do, you don't have to match it. So we'll see if that stays in as it goes through. So then in the committee substitute that they introduced yesterday, they also provided general fund dollars for us to build a new Gordon Ford College of Business. So that's about 74.4 million for a new building, which I think we all know walking into Grice Hall is very needed. So we're very hopeful that that will stay in as well. So now that the budget has been passed out of the House, they passed it off the floor last night. It has already been accepted, received in the Senate. So the Senate will now basically craft their own budget. We do not expect them to just, pass this one as is. And then they'll not agree on the budget and they'll go into conference committee and then we'll finally get the full budget. So we are just one small step into the full process of how this works. One thing I did fail to mention is the pension subsidy that we received last year for our increase in KERS employer liability. They did continue to fund that at 100%. So the original bill that was passed is that that funding would come down by 10% each year until we got to 50%, but they went ahead and funded it at 100% level. So that is wonderful as well. So the budget looks great for post-secondary education, and President and I will continue to advocate that it stays intact the way that it is, or they make it even better in the Senate side. So we'll see how that goes. Beyond that, there are some bills that we're just keeping our eyes on that right now haven't even been referred to a committee. The biggest one obviously right now is the budget. My colleagues and I, so there's one of me at every university. We are all working on a bill for some statutory relief, just some items, just some things to make our business processes and things a little more streamlined. So I haven't even seen a draft of that yet, but as that moves, I'll keep you all posted on that one. And then the last thing is, I think it was 2014, it might have been 15. The legislature passed a bill that requires all of our board members to be confirmed by the Senate. In the past, that was customary for boards, but for some reason, post-secondary education was not included in that. So I will be making sure the Senate knows that we have two board members that need to be confirmed, Dr. Bell and Ms. Thomas. So we'll make sure that that they're aware of those, which they usually are, because the governor's office provides those lists of appointments that they've made to the Senate. But don't be surprised if that's not done until the last day of session, because that's a lot of times how it works. It's just resolutions that they pass on the Senate floor. But then a lot of times they hold those until kind of the end of session when they're waiting on bills to go back and forth between chambers. They'll do some of that. So beyond that, I encourage all of you all, I do a weekly update on the government relations website. Our bill tracking sheet is updated every Friday as well on there. So you're welcome to get on there and view anything that we are tracking. And if you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer those for you. But that website is wku.edu/gov relations. So President Kubani, do you have anything to add?
Yes, Jennifer. First of all, let me thank Jennifer for her efforts, not just on behalf of the university, but also as the convener of the legislative liaisons for all of post-secondary higher education. She's doing a terrific job and has been doing a terrific job, particularly in a difficult time with not being able to be in Frankfurt last year. I'm really pleased with where we're beginning of the session. As Jennifer said, there's a long way to go. But this is the best start we've had since I've been here, and arguably the best budget for post-secondary education in 20 years. And so I think that we're in a good place. A lot of work to go between here and there, and this is one of those invisible things that we spend a great deal of time and effort on, but that's crucially important to the university. And so I'm pleased that there's the potential of additional performance funding, asset preservation, and of course, our #1 capital project priority, the Gordon Ford College of Business. We're going to work hard to make sure that our legislators advocate for us and get that included on the Senate side. And so again, I know that there are bills floating out there around which folks may have concerns or questions. And one of the things about government relations that's interesting is that sometimes you don't want to break into jail. And so while we follow those and work in the background on them, we're not very loud about that. And so that's a strategic decision on the part of government relations and President's office. And so, but I do encourage folks who have questions or concerns to reach out to Jennifer. That's her job. And she'll help explain where we are and where we're moving forward. And I think that this is going to be a good session for us.
What do we estimate our current deferred maintenance need is compared to that 37 million?
It's a drop in the bucket. We have almost $500 million in deferred maintenance.
Any other questions?
Can I quick comment? In reference to the President's break into jail comment, you know, there are sometimes that we have concerns about bills and it's better to work through, and we've seen this for years now. There are presently 2 House bills and 2 Senate bills that I have questions about that we've funneled to Jennifer to avoid, you know, that direct confrontation with any members of the legislature or sponsors. We don't anticipate that there are problems. It's a just in case measure. This is an incredibly valuable tool because our colleagues at EKU and Murray sometimes have some of the same concerns as I have related to what we do. And we can take that through an independent person and everybody's happy because we'll get a good qualified opinion based on whether or not it's even a problem. And I really appreciate what Jennifer's done for years on our behalf in that role. So thanks.
Well, it may be helpful for you all to know every Thursday, so we're called the Bulls, all the university legislative liaisons, that's what they call us up there. And so we have a Bulls meeting every Thursday and we go through the CPE's part of that. We go through the bill chart that CPE is following, and we talk about any pieces of legislation that anyone has heard about or, you know, share what we're hearing. So we all work very, very closely together and we get more done that way. All right, well, if you all need anything,
Yeah,
we're happy.
that's a lot of happenings and good for us to hear that. Just as a refresher, and Susan, you may know that, what is our pension subsidy liability that they're funding 100% of this year?
It's 3.5 million is the.
3.5 million.
We're running short, right?
Well, no, I don't think so. No, so what they did with House Bill 8 last year, just so everybody knows, is they were trying to come up with a way that all of the unfunded liability could be paid. And so KERS provided information on what they looked at every single state quasi-governmental agencies and what they're looking at. So universities, health departments, places like that, to see what is our unfunded liability, and then they amortize that over 30 years. So we were currently paying, the employer contribution rate was 49% roughly, what we paid on each employee, KERS employee. Our rate went up to 75, is that right? 75%. And so what they did is they looked at the difference in what we were currently paying and what the rate went up to, and that's the subsidy that they gave us. And so we will be at that 79% for 30 years. When that 30 years stops, we're supposed to go down to the normal cost, which is 10%. And so that will save a tremendous amount of money when that happens. Notice I say suppose, this is what's supposed to happen. This is the way that it was mapped out. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All right, well, you don't look like a bull, but better a bull than a bear, I guess, which are rattling around the brush in Wall Street today. All right, that concludes our information items.
I move that the executive committee go into closed session as provided KRS 61.810 subsection 1 for purposes of discussing pending legal matters involving
Clear the room.